So good morning, my name is Raudhatul Jannah and I will now be presenting the analysis I've conducted for the Intro to Sociolinguistics assignment. So the ethnic group that I have chosen is Ainu. So a little bit of the background of Ainu. So the term Ainu can actually be used for both the ethnic group and as well as their language. So Ainus have inhabited northern Japan as well as some parts of the far Russian East for decades, for centuries really, and they have historically faced oppression by the Japanese government through systematic efforts to assimilate them into Japanese culture, which eventually led to their language shift, which I will delve more into detail in a bit. So after years of oppression, the Ainus were officially classified as indigenous by the Japanese government in April 2019. So going now into a bit of the characteristics of the language. So Ainu language is a language isolate. So this means that the language has no known relative or any definitive links to other language families. So there are also different types of dialects for this language. The first one is Hokkaido Ainu, the second one is Sakhalin Ainu, and the last one is Kuril Ainu. So these three dialects are similar in terms of grammar patterns, but then differ in terms of vocabulary and also pronunciation. So the paper that I've chosen for this assignment, there are two. The first one is by a researcher named Bajorn Dotir of the paper The Ainu of Northern Japan, Revitalizing a Dying Culture. And the second one is by a researcher named Powell, entitled Reconsidering Resistance, Ainu Culture Revival as Protest. So within these two papers, I've obtained information to explain the factors that have contributed to Ainu's language shift. So as we know, language shift can occur due to a community due to social status, economic opportunities, and education, and these are factors that contributed to Ainu's language shift. However, these were all kind of pushed by the Japanese government through systematic efforts in hopes of assimilating Ainu into Japanese culture. So this officially began during the Japanese occupation of Ezochi, which is today's modern day Hokkaido. So they've conducted this to gain power in the north. This began during the 1868 under the Meiji Restoration, or what can be called also the Meiji era. And the aim of this era was to, in a way, modernize Japan by implementing Western tactics and systems. So this all leads to the second point on my factors that contributed to Ainu's language shift, which is internal colonization and assimilation, particularly the systematic efforts that the Japanese government has conducted to assimilate Ainu into Japanese culture. So the Japanese government utilized education to do this through mandated Japanese education system that disregarded native languages. So they've done this by promoting Japanese language as Hyujongo. So Hyujongo means standard. This reiterates the notion of Japanese dominance as well as Japanese superiority. Conversely, native languages such as the Ainu language were perceived as uneducated, inferior, and also barbaric. So as I've stated previously, social status can push a language into experiencing language shift. And by utilizing education in this way, the Japanese had pushed down the social status of native languages, which led to them experiencing language shift. So moving on to the third factor that contribute to Ainu's language shift, which is negative perceptions and stigmas. So this factor also pertains to Ainu's social status within their community and their society. So the Japanese government had slowly instilled feelings of shame towards Ainu depiction, which actually led to descendants of Ainu to hide their heritage, as Ainu culture and language were associated with terms such as uncivilized and inferior. An example of this could be seen by the Japanese government officially classifying Ainus as evil or emishi, which bears the meaning of barbarians, as well as later on classifying them as kyudojin. So dojin carries implicit meanings of savagery and basically negative connotations alongside with it. So the fourth factor that contributes to Ainu's language shift is the Natives Protection Act, which is a legislation that was created during the Meiji Restoration era to further assimilate Ainu into Japanese culture. And this was conducted through prohibiting Ainu's cultural traditional practices, such as their clothing, traditional tattoos, An example of certain acts that were conducted under this legislation was the imposition of Japanese surnames. And this actually disrupted Ainu culture, as Ainus believed that the deceased would be able to communicate again with the living, which the surname imposition disrupted. Another example would be the renaming of Ainu-owned land into Japanese names. So these particular efforts further diminish and also undermine Ainu as a language, again further reiterating the notion of Japanese superiority and Japanese dominance. So the implication of Japanese colonization on Ainu as a community and the implications on its language is, as of today, the Ainu language is still classified as critically endangered. UNESCO defined Ainu language as critically endangered with fewer than 20 proficient speakers remaining. Cultural impact includes gradual erasure of traditional Ainu practices and stories, and also a loss of cultural heritage and traditional languages. However, due to the consistent efforts of Japanese government's assimilation towards Ainu communities and their tradition and practices, there has been revitalization efforts. It was prominent during the 1970s to up till the 1990s with increased awareness and commemoration on Ainu culture and history as a form of protest against the Japanese government. With this, there was also the creation of legislation of a Natives Protection Act for the Ainu community, and through this the culture and traditions of Ainus were actually protected by the government, and efforts were made under this act to revitalize the language, which I will be delving into in ways of reversing language shift momentarily. So moving on to ways of reversing language shift. For this particular part, I analyzed a paper by the researcher 9 with the paper entitled A Study on Global Citizenship Education from the Perspective of the Inclusion of Heritage Language Education. So in this paper, the author basically argues for the implementation of heritage language education and teaching global citizenship education. So it argues that alongside having practical efforts such as accessible classrooms, accessible reading materials to learn the language itself, it's also important to implement a sense of cultural pride into the individuals that are learning the language. As in language maintenance, the attitude of the community itself is important. So some efforts that were conducted by the Ainus to revitalize the language includes legislated support by the Japanese government, which is through the Ainu Cultural Promotion Act that was created in the 1997, which replaces the former act that I've stated previously that the Japanese government created to institutionalize the assimilation efforts against Ainus into Japanese culture. So within this act, it ensured government protection of Ainu language and culture, and also the foundation for research and promotion of Ainu culture was created. As Ainu has faced decades of oppression by the Japanese government and their efforts of assimilating them, there are a lot of challenges in the beginning stages of revitalizing the languages. So this includes limited number of fluent Ainu speakers, as well as insufficient educational materials. To kind of find for a solution for this is the production of textbooks for different Ainu dialects that I've mentioned earlier, through the foundation that I've stated, which is the Foundation of Research and Promotion of Ainu Culture. There have also been creation of grammar books, dictionaries, and translated stories, which are stories from Japanese into Ainu language, development of educational games and songs, as well as annual Ainu speech contests and craft contests to promote a sense of passion into the individuals that are learning Ainu language. And lastly, to make accessible Ainu language learning, the creation of digital learning platforms such as Nico Nico Duga. Lastly, in ways of reversing language shift, as I've stated previously, the argument of implementing HLE into GCED, particularly for language maintenance and language revitalization, is to also address the bias that exists within native languages. So this, for Ainu particularly, can exist due to the perception that the Japanese government had placed onto Ainu communities for decades, which is that they are barbaric, inferior, and uneducated. So by addressing these biases, we can implement a sense of cultural pride in the community, which helps with language management, which helps with language maintenance. So HLE and GCD implementation for language maintenance focuses on revitalizing the language simultaneously while addressing biases. It promotes cultural enthusiasm and heritage pride. It integrates Ainu language into education, where I stated earlier that education is a powerful tool in language maintenance. So if it exists in education, it can help preserve the language for a long time. And lastly, utilization of technology for language learning.